What kind of person shuts down a family barbecue over a whiff of smoke? That's what I kept asking myself as HOA Karen stormed onto my deck. Her floral dress billowing like a war flag. Her voice sharp enough to slice through the summer air. It was a Saturday, the kind where the sun hangs low and lazy. And my backyard was alive with laughter, the sizzle of burgers, and the clink of lemonade glasses. My daughter, Ellie, was chasing her cousins through the grass, their giggles mixing with the classic rock humming from my old radio. I'd spent all morning prepping marinating ribs, chopping veggies, stacking charcoal just right. This wasn't just a barbecue. It was a memory in the making. A rare day when my whole family could gather without work or school stealing the moment. Then she appeared. HOA. The HOA president. All 5 feet of her puffed up with self-righteous fury. Her arms crossed, so tight her knuckles were white. This is a violation. She barked, pointing at my grill like it was a crime scene. Open flames are prohibited under Section 4. 2. 7 of the Covenants. I stood there, tongs in hand, grease smudged on my apron, trying to process how my backyard had become her battlefield. I forced a smile, hoping to defuse her. HOA. It's just a barbecue. We're not burning the neighborhood down. But she wasn't having it. Her eyes narrowed, and she jabbed a manicured finger toward the smoke curling up from the grill. You're endangering everyone. I've had complaints. Complaints. From who? The neighbors I could see over the fence, waving and holding their own beers. The kids playing tag. I invited her to join us, thinking maybe a burger could soften her edges. She scoffed, pulled out her phone, and snapped pictures of my grill like a detective at a murder scene. You'll hear from the board, she said, her voice dripping with triumph as she marched off. I stood there, the spatula limp in my hand, watching her disappear into her pristine house across the street. The kids were still laughing, but the air felt heavier now, like her shadow had snuffed out the sun. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words, her smug certainty that she could dictate my life. I'd moved to this neighborhood for the quiet streets and good schools, not to have my every move policed by a woman who treated her HOA binder like a holy book. By morning, I was done playing nice. I dug through the HOA covenants, a dense packet of rules I'd barely skimmed when we bought the house. Section 4. 2. 7 was real, but vague something about open flames being subject to board approval. Approval I'd never been told I needed. I called my neighbor, Mike, who'd lived here for a decade. He laughed bitterly when I mentioned HOA. She's been terrorizing everyone for years. He said, "Find me $200 for leaving my trash can out an hour past pickup." He told me about others' misses. Larson, who got a lien on her house for an unapproved mailbox. The Garcias, who were threatened with eviction over a backyard trampoline. HOA wasn't just a nuisance. She was a tyrant, and her board was her loyal army. I decided to fight back, not with yelling or threats, but with something HOA couldn't bully, the law. I spent hours researching, my kitchen table buried under legal pads and coffee mugs. The HOA's own bylaws gave me an opening. They required transparency in rule enforcement, something HOA had never bothered with. No notices, no hearings, just her word as gospel. I drafted a letter demanding proof of the complaints she'd claimed in a formal hearing. I sent it certified mail, knowing she'd hate the paper trail. Sure enough, she responded with a $500 fine for noncompliance and a notice to cease all outdoor cooking. No explanation, no discussion, just her signature, scrawled like a royal decree. That's when I knew this wasn't just about my barbecue. It was about power. I hired a lawyer, Sarah, who specialized in HOA disputes. She was a calm, no-nonsense woman who saw through HOA's bluster instantly. "She's overstepped," Sarah said, flipping through the HOA's records. "No documentation of complaints. No board vote on your fine. She's running this like her personal kingdom." We filed a lawsuit against the HOA for abuse of authority, seeking not just to void the fine, but to dissolve the board entirely. It was a bold move, but I was done letting HOA dictate my life. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Some supported me quietly. Others were too scared of HOA's wrath to speak up. Mike brought me a six-pack and a list of neighbors willing to testify about her overreach. Mrs. Larson shared how HOA had humiliated her at a board meeting over that mailbox. The Garcias sent me a photo of their kids crying when they had to dismantle their trampoline. This wasn't just my fight anymore. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. While digging through public records, Sarah found something explosive: HOA's house. Her perfect, rule-abiding castle was built on a lot zoned improperly. Years ago, the HOA had pushed through a variance to let her build closer to the property line than allow it a favor from a previous board she'd charmed or bullied. It was a technicality, but it was leverage. If we could prove the board had bent rules for her, it would expose her hypocrisy and weaken her grip. I felt a surge of hope, but also dread. HOA wasn't the type to back down. She'd fight dirty, and I was about to face her head-on. The showdown came at the county courthouse, a squat brick building that felt too small for the storm brewing inside. HOA sat across the room, her lips pursed, her eyes boring into me like I'd personally insulted her ancestors. The board flanked her three nervous men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Sarah laid out our case with surgical precision: the lack of transparency, the arbitrary fines, the pattern of harassment. She presented affidavits from neighbors, each one a dagger to HOA's authority. When Sarah dropped the zoning bombshell, the room gasped. HOA's face flushed red, and for the first time, she looked unsteady, like a queen realizing her throne was crumbling. She tried to interrupt, claiming the variance was irrelevant, but the judge wasn't having it. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Mrs. Nguyen, you enforce rules with an iron fist, yet you benefited from special treatment. Explain that." She stammered, her usual venom replaced by flustered excuses. It was the first crack in her armor, and it felt like justice. But HOA wasn't done. She stood, her voice rising to a shrill pitch, accusing me of defaming the HOA and disrupting community harmony. She pointed at me, her finger trembling. "He's the one breaking rules, not me." It was a performance, pure theater, but it backfired. The judge's gavel slammed, silencing her. Sarah calmly presented the HOA's own bylaws, showing how HOA had violated them by acting unilaterally. The neighbors' testimonies sealed it, story after story of her petty tyranny. Mrs. Larson's voice shook as she described the mailbox incident. Mike's anger simmered as he recounted the trash can fine. The Garcias lawyers submitted their eviction threat as evidence of bad faith. HOA's board members squirmed, their loyalty to her evaporating under the courtroom's fluorescent lights. The ruling came like a thunderclap. The judge voided my fine, declared the HOA's enforcement practices illegal, and ordered the board's dissolution for gross misconduct. HOA's zoning variance was revoked, pending a county review that could force her to tear down part of her house. She sat frozen, her hands gripping the table, as the sheriff's deputy approached with paperwork. "You're relieved of your duties," he said, his voice flat but firm. The room felt electric, like the air before a storm breaks. Neighbors in the gallery whispered, some in shock, others in quiet triumph. I caught Mike's eye. He gave me a nod, his grin saying what words couldn't. HOA stormed out, her heels clicking furiously. But her power was gone, stripped away in front of everyone she'd tried to control. The aftermath wasn't pretty. HOA's house became a legal battleground. She fought the county's zoning review tooth and nail. But last I heard, she was facing a hefty fine or demolition. The neighborhood felt lighter, like a weight had lifted. We elected a new HOA board, one that promised transparency and fairness. Mike volunteered to serve, and Mrs. Larson got her mailbox back, painted bright blue just to spite HOA's ghost. The Garcias put their trampoline up again, and Ellie spent half her summer bouncing on it with their kids. I hosted another barbecue the next month, bigger than the last, with half the neighborhood showing up. The grill smoked, the music played, and no one mentioned covenants or fines. It wasn't just about winning a lawsuit. It was about taking back our home, our joy, our right to live without someone's shadow over every moment. Looking back, I think about what that barbecue meant, not just the food or the laughter, but the fight it sparked. It taught me that standing up to a bully, even one with a rulebook and a title, is worth it. It's not just about your own backyard. It's about everyone's. When you let someone like HOA run unchecked, you lose more than a Saturday afternoon. You lose your freedom to live. So, fire up the grill. Invite the neighbors. Laugh loud. And if someone tries to shut you down, fight back. Not with anger, but with truth. Because sometimes, the smallest battles like a barbecue in a suburban backyard can change everything. End.